Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Feel free to use the chat or the Q&A to ask questions throughout tonight's event. And if you can just hold on a bit longer, we'll get started as soon as we can admit everybody into the event. Welcome, everybody. We'll be starting in just a minute. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Museum of Latin American Art's 2021 Afro-Latinx Festival. My name is Simone Moffett. I am the graphic designer here at MOLA. And on behalf of the rest of the staff, I'd like to thank you for joining us today as we learn more about the diversity of Afro-Latinx experiences and dive into the history of the African legacy throughout Latin America. Before we begin, I would like to thank the event sponsor that made this 10-day event possible and accessible. Please enjoy this short message from our presenting sponsor, the Port of Long Beach.
Hola, I'm Mario Cordero. Welcome to the Museum of Latin American Art's 2021 Afro-Latinx Festival. We are pleased to sponsor this event that highlights the rich diversity in our community. Throughout our history, the Port of Long Beach has long been a supporter of education, the arts, and community efforts that amplify and deepen the understanding of our cultural tapestry and impact. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy this exploration of the African influence in Latin America and Latinx culture. Felicidades, el Museo de Latin American Art. Muchas gracias por esta oportunidad.
MOLA receives additional support from the Robert Gumbiner Foundation, the City of Long Beach, and the Arts Council of Long Beach. Tonight's event is hosted by and moderated by Tasha W. Hunter. Tasha is a California-born and based filmmaker, event planner, educator, and writer. Over the past 2 decades, she has worked in a variety of professional capacities centered around the community, arts, and education in both the private and public sectors. She is an avid world traveler and researcher, focusing her studies on the African diaspora and cross-culture experiences and commonalities. Tasha is the co-founder of Wiggins Hunter Consulting Group and is currently a Cultural Heritage Commissioner for the City of Long Beach, a founding board member and VP of the African American Cultural Center of Long Beach, and past president of the Arts Council for Long Beach. She is the proud mother to 3 amazing children, Asia, Mo, and Kai. We hope you enjoy tonight's program.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos, buon noite, and good evening to all. This is a very exciting event, and I want to say that I love the Afro-Latinx Festival here at MOLA. Last year I was there in person and met so many amazing people. So many amazing people. I ate amazing food, delicious food that just brought back so many memories. Memories of the places that I've traveled. And I got to dance. We danced. We did a lot of dancing to soca and salsa, merengue and samba. And it just made me say, yo tenho muito saudades de Brazil. I miss Brazil so much. And yo tenho muito saudades de gente. I miss so many people. That's Portuguese. I will say I'm very happy to be here with you all today, and happy that we're able to partner with MOLA as we navigate in this new space, in this new world. And I want to say, in our ancient African and indigenous tradition, I'd like to ask any elders in the audience if we do have your permission to move forward with tonight's event. I guess in this new tradition of this new form, if you can type it in the chat, we'd like to ask for your permission to move forward. All righty, thank you for that. Ashe. So in a few minutes, I want to share the whole thought process behind this event. But first, I wanted to say that we are a new organization, the African American Cultural Center of Long Beach, and exciting things are happening with our organization. And we have a temporary location, and we have monthly community roundtables and more. But I'd like to take a moment to introduce Ms. Phaedra Allen, who is our program committee chair. She's going to share some words about the AACCLB and some of the things that we do. Welcome, Phaedra.
Hey, greetings. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? No? me okay?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Is that better? Oh my gosh.
It's a little low, but while Phaedra is getting her sound,
Okay, is that better?
that's a lot better.
I tell you, this Zoom technology is always something. So greetings, everyone. My name is Phaedra Allen. Thank you, Tasha, for the introduction. I am a member of the African American Cultural Center here in Long Beach, and as she shared, I have the honor of serving as the chair of the programming committee. And I say an honor because really this is passion work. We are a board of very excited community members who have volunteered to really bring this community center or this cultural center forward to serve as a linkage in our community, a hub of African American culture and activity, a place where people can learn, educate themselves more about the African American culture and tradition, and also a touchstone for the African American community here in Long Beach so that we can gather and connect with one another. So I just want to acknowledge the board who I'm sure here in the room as well. We are excited about tonight's discussion. And I invite you all to stay connected with us. As Tasha shared, we have monthly activities, and soon we're going to be hosting a virtual exhibit of Forgotten Images, which we are very, very excited for. So we do hope that you will stay connected and look forward to seeing you soon. And hand that back over to Tasha. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Thank you, Phaedra. And once again, visit us at AACCLB.org, sign up for our newsletter and hear about all of our exciting events that are taking place. So the whole concept behind this, I heard something that was a little disturbing. As a transplant to Long Beach, this is the place I call home. I recently heard the Black and brown community does not get along here in Long Beach. And that jolted me. And in true fashion, I started asking around, and the first person I called was Griselda Suarez, who I'm going to introduce you to, but you probably already know. And I called one of my elders, and I called some neighborhood folks, fourth generation Long Beach people. And some of them confirmed that. So when it was time to do this event with MOLA, again, this is the conversation that I proposed. It's a intriguing conversation. It's a intentional conversation. It's an important conversation. And I will say to that, the Black and brown community don't get along. It's time to change the narrative. It's time to change our relationships. People are watching and listening at this point in time, right here, right now. So what better time than now? With that being said, she needs no introduction, but she has been a true advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you all may have seen the equity poster where there's the people standing outside of a field, of a stadium. I think it's a baseball game. And they're at different levels. And then there's a picture that shows, okay, give everybody the box so that they all can see into the stadium, right? And we were looking at this. I was looking at this with Griselda, and she was like, you know what? That photo's cool, that's good for equity. She said, but I wanna see all those people inside of that stadium enjoying that game. So that's the Griselda I know. And with that, she is a writer, artist, cook, and teacher. She was born in unincorporated East Los Angeles and believes that the arts are essential in empowering others to express their thoughts. Throughout her career, she has created programming and teaching dedicated and trainings dedicated to facilitating transformation and creating agency for her community. In 2016, she became the executive director of the Arts Council for Long Beach. Most recently, Griselda was awarded under 40 by the Long Beach Post for her leadership in the arts and her resilience in battling cancer. Suarez is dedicated to Long Beach and loves contributing to the city because she strongly believes in the impact of local the local artist has on residents' lives. Griselda Suarez.
Buenas noches, everybody. Thank you for including me in this conversation, Tasha, and wanting me to contribute to the brainstorm and the community thought here. I also just want to take a moment and recognize that I live and work on traditional and sacred lands of Tongva, Kich, Achaman, and Shumash, and many other indigenous groups that call today these grounds and lands home. I honor and extend my gratitude to all the original people still living today and contributing their lives to this region. I with Tasha and many other folks in the community, think that there are many bridges yet to be built. And I think many of us are here today to learn about that and to engage. And I want to say thank you to our panelists who have decided to join us in this journey. And I'm proud to, have one of our grantees from the Arts Council, Ryan Hoyle, give his story, present his storytelling, and also one of our grantees and also former board members, Gloria Arjona, here. And I think there is a spectrum that many of us live through, right? That have lived through in our families and have never brought forward. And behind me tonight is one of my favorite images that I love from the revolution by Agustin Casasola. And what I love about this is that it reminds me of several things. One, this photo is a person from Michoacan, which is my father's homeland. And between what you see in me and this unknown person, because we don't know who it was, you see my entire family. My family is all of this. In Michoacan, we come in all of these faces and shades. And so I just wanted to bring them here, because the other thing we don't know is in the revolution, there were many people who were queer, butch identified, or transgender, and we don't know. But I just wanted to bring them here tonight, and thank you again for including me.
Thank you, Griselda. At this time, we wanted to share some community rules. As we move through this process, through this evening, we just want to make sure that we are staying on topic, and they're in the chat as well. So thank you for including those in the chat. We want to make sure that we're holding each other accountable. We're listening for understanding. Acknowledge our own privilege within the intersections of races, ages, ableist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, and transphobic society. Recognize the space we take up and or hold because of this privilege. Center the voices of Black people, Indigenous people, and the people of color that choose to share in this space. Let's own our mistakes, own your mistakes, your intentions, and your impacts. Respect each other's experiences and honor confidentiality. Speak honestly and from your own experiences. Appreciate silence and processing time. Share the space, allow others to finish before you speak. Be present, exercise self-care. It is okay to disagree. Check hierarchy at the door and value the voices of every member equally. Speak from personal experiences using I statements. And with that, I want to thank you all once again for being present and for being here. Thank you for supporting our vision. Hey, Griselda, so let's talk about the importance of telling our stories.
Well, storytelling in many ways for me as a writer as a poet is about exerting our breath from our body onto our community. And this last year has really impacted me, because after my lifetime and many lifetimes of holding our breaths or not being able to express, it has come to a point where we can no longer, right, exist that way. And so for me, as I shared with you, it was really important to be able to exercise that storytelling, that breath, and that many of our stories live on because of oral tradition.
Right, and that's one of those commonalities that we are going to talk about later on as well. In our African tradition, we have our griots, and we don't have written stories, and many times, and we wonder why our elders will repeat the same things over and over again. I used to say, Granny Ma, you told me that story already. And now that Granny Ma is an ancestor, I realize that that's part of the oral tradition of me remembering and rehearing those stories so that we can pass them on down to our next generations. So we have an exciting group of panelists that are going to be here today. I'm going to call them storytellers. Our storytellers that are here, and just a quick layout of how the day is going to go, how the evening is going to go. We're going to have our storytellers tell their stories. They are within our Afro-Latinx community. Ryan Hoyle, Bresheena Baseel, and Dr. Gloria Arjona. And we're going to tell you a little bit about them. Griselda? I think our first panelist is Ryan. Uh-oh, you're still muted, but let me introduce Ryan. Ryan is a Long Beach native and multi-hyphenate creative, using his gifts to develop and foster positive, lasting change in communities of color. As an adjunct professor and founder of Play Nice Long Beach, his passion lies in bridging the gap between education and outcomes in creative professions and industries. So at this time, I want to pass this over to Ryan. Welcome, Ryan. We're so happy to have you here.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the intro, and to all the attendees and guests. Thank you so much for being a part of this programming. Thank you to MOLA, the Arts Council, and the Port of Long Beach for sponsoring such critical work, and really just taking a stance on creating a community that's more racially aware. Also, happy Black History Month. I feel like this intersection and having this programming during this month is something that's equally important to have. Just to get started, I see some familiar names in the list of attendees, but for those who don't know me, my name is Ryan Hoyle. I am a Long Beach native, born in Los Angeles, raised in Long Beach, a product of the Long Beach Unified School District, graduated from Poly High School, went on to study communications and marketing at California State University, Long Beach, and then eventually got my master's in counseling from LMU. That led me to picking up positions, interning, and leading me to becoming an adjunct professor at Southwest College, where I teach counseling, introductory counseling classes. I also am the co-owner and founder of Play Nice Long Beach, which is a community hub, community resource center, art gallery, vintage retail spot, all in one. Essentially, we create space for Black and Brown youth to creatively express themselves, whether that be via pop-up shops, programming, financial literacy, seminars, voter registration drives, things of that nature. But we are I'd like to say the voice of young Black and Brown Long Beach. Me and my business partners took it upon ourselves to create that space just out of the need for Black and Brown youth to have relatable role models and not these robots, and people that they can't really relate to. Essentially that's why I do what I do. As a Black American and someone who identifies as a Black American of Garifuna descent. For those of you that don't know, the Garifuna people are Afro-Indigenous people, an ethnic group based in Honduras and other Central American countries. And this is a really unique opportunity for me as well, as someone that's learning in public and learning more about my heritage. I'm really eager to share my art and experience as I continue to learn more about the culture, as this has been a part of my identity that I haven't known much about for a large part of my life. So really excited to share with you all some of the work that I've been doing and researching. Today, I'll be sharing with you guys an excerpt from a project that I've been currently developing. It goes by the name of Rememory. This project basically is a community-driven digital archiving experience that uses photography to actively document and preserve history. The project Rememory is largely inspired by the work of Toni Morrison in her novel Beloved, where she coined the term Rememory, and she pretty much used it in the novel as a tool for self-discovery through reliving a memory, thus Rememory. I really feel that photos and photographs, photography is as much of a visual connection to our past as it is to our present and future. And, just being able to relive certain moments and highlight, folks that might be pictured in certain photographs that might have had an impact or lasting impression on you. There's power in that. And through this project, I really aim to kind of relive some of these experiences. The Rememory Project pre-COVID was supposed to be an event that took place at Play Nice, where attendees will be given the opportunity to come in, scan a photo that meant something to them. And then there's a creative writing component where attendees will write out, what was going on in the photo, how they felt, any type of emotions or feelings that were connected to that photograph. And then they'd be able to scan it and actually compile a book that kind of makes up the community. So still working on that and working the kinks out on that. But essentially the power is in reclaiming ownership of these narratives and of these images. A lot of times, you hear it all the time. If you don't tell your story, you'll allow someone else to tell it. So we want to take that power back and reclaim these images and really get the information out there to create a society that, is more racially aware and, in tune with a lot of the stories and narratives of the people that make up the community. This is really an ethnographic approach to research and documenting, again, meant to highlight and reflect on the people, places, memories, and moments that have shaped our individual experiences. So I'm going to open it up and share my screen really quickly. Okay. So in the spirit of the name Decolotes, I actually did a color palette to go along with the photos. These are all photos that I've taken while spending time in Honduras. So I'll pretty much mimic how I imagine the project Rememory going. So this is a photo of my grandmother. I titled it Granny. This is her in the village of Mañali in Honduras, coastal indigenous lands. My grandmother touting a smile. This is how I usually see her and how she greets me. Looking at the photo now, it really just evokes memories of growing up and having my grandma be in Honduras for 6 months out of the year. And, growing up as a child, it's like, oh, Granny's gone, or Granny's coming back, but we never really knew what was going on in Honduras while she was away. So to be able to experience her homeland and ancestral lands with her was an amazing experience and something that I'll cherish forever. Moving along, this is a soccer field also in the village of Mañali where my late grandfather lived at. This is actually right outside of his home. And I just think of all of the time spent here with the youth in the village, playing soccer, being young and active. I really remember my grandfather always speaking about having a peace of mind and how relaxing being in the village was. And, you know, in an area where, you know, there's no paved roads, electricity comes from generators, things of that nature, just really highlighting the simple things. So just this imagery brings about like feelings of peace and relaxation, inspired by my late grandfather. This one is Nitu's house.
Ryan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I apologize. We're not seeing the other images.
Okay. Let's see. Were you able to see the first one?
Ryan, were you sharing a specific window or your entire desktop?
I believe it's the entire desktop, but let me.
You can see a preview, like open of the first photo, but nothing else.
Okay.
Background's white. Okay, me too. That's the house. There's a person standing in the front.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
When I enter full screen mode from the PDF, I think that's where it causes the issue. I'm going to try it again and see if it works. Okay, I'll just go from here. I think it's an issue with the full screen. Are you able to see it? Yes. Okay. So this one is titled Nitu's house. Nitu in the native language, Garifunas, is older sister. This is the home of my grandmother's late older sister, Nitu. This is where we would spend most of our time. Really feelings of breakfast, chickens and roosters roaming free, and really just this photo encapsulates the rawness of life in Manyali. Again, back to the idea of peace of mind and really just the essentials. I think this really highlights that. And here's a photo of Nitu, who passed away last year. Again, this is my grandmother's older sister. Really a strong woman, amazing memory. Although she didn't speak English and I don't speak Spanish, I felt like we were still able to communicate via family members. And, you know, she had all of the photo books and would, you know, point to photos of me and my siblings as youngsters. So just always great memories when I think of her. This is a photo that I took last December. This group of women is known as Club 06. They are cultural caretakers. Essentially what they do is they make sure that folks in the village are kept aware and reminded of cultural practices and rituals and things of that nature, traditions and such. So this was actually around Christmas time, and they were at Nitu's house doing dances and singing traditional songs and native songs. Very interesting experience, to say the least. This is a photo that I took of one of the Garifuna youth, who goes by Rory. I think that it was just so fascinating for him to see, you know, the technology and to be able to, you know, have a photo taken of himself in places like this where, you know, technology isn't the #1 priority. You know, it's important to see yourself, you know? So I remember taking this photo and just seeing the joy and seeing his face light up and him being able to see it, not even developed or on a computer screen, but literally on the camera itself. So this is just an amazing experience as well. And really get to see how rich the colors are and again, the raw elements of life in the village. This is a photo I took of another Garifuna youth, goes by Kendi. This photo was pretty cool to take. It actually was getting pretty dark, and she noticed that I took a photo of Rory, and she kept insisting that I take a photo of her as well. So that was pretty fun. A memory that I have with Kendi is sitting on the porch of the house, and you know, me speaking English, not speaking the native language, and not being fluent in Spanish. It was really interesting to see the dynamic of Kendi, who was fluent in the native language and in Spanish, but was yearning to learn English. So we were participating in a little, educational workshop, so to speak, where she was translating certain words and asking for the English translation. So she was, really trying desperately to learn English while teaching us Garifuna and Spanish, which was a very interesting exchange. This is Hilber. This is almost like an uncle figure. He's a math teacher in the village, handyman, and just all around good guy. When we go and visit, he's the one, the muscle essentially. And just learning a little bit about his story and his experience definitely helped kind of put some things in perspective in terms of, living in the village and some of the history and the historical context that come along with it. Next and last closing is a photo that I took in another village called Sangrelaya. I think the thing that stands out the most about this photo and this trip was that I actually went and was accompanied by my brother, who actually spent a year living in Honduras as a cultural immersion project from a fellowship that he received. And just getting the tour from him and being able to experience, how he was living for that year was really an amazing experience. Obviously, you see the two youth that are walking down the road. It just felt right. For me, it symbolizes, me and my brother on that journey and on that trip to understanding, more about our identities and our culture. I think that's the last one that I have, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you. Brian, thank you for sharing your story and your photos. It's beautiful to see places that some of us may have never been and hear those stories and of family.
Appreciate the opportunity.
And that's what tonight is all about. We're telling stories, we're sharing stories. And the first portion of this, we're gonna hear stories. We heard Ryan's story. We'll hear Miss Bresheena Baseel's story, and then Dr. Gloria Arjona, we'll hear her story. And then we're gonna turn it over to our community here. Well, you'll have the opportunity to share your stories. Depending on the number of people that wanna share, we'd like to, give you 4 minutes. 4 minutes to talk. This is this is one of the many of first steps. So next up, I'd like to introduce, actually Griselda. Would you like to introduce Miss Bresheena?
Go right ahead, Tasha.
Okay. So, Bresheena Baseel is the founder of Azúcar Negra Productions, an event production company that focuses on exposing the community to the diversity that exists among African Black culture. She was inspired to create this company because as a first-generation American, product of a Belizean father and a Salvadorian mother, she did not see enough Afrolatinidad represented in the media or in her surrounding community. She was raised in Southern California and later moved to the Bay Area to attend San Francisco State University by way of Long Beach City College, which is where I met her as one of my students in a program. She obtained her Bachelors of Science in Business Administration with a concentration in management. She was heavily involved with multiple student organizations during her academic career and continues her work in community organizing through original Blackprint, an organization geared towards holistically transforming the material conditions of African Black people. I'd like to introduce you all to Miss Bresheena Baseel.
Thank you. Thank you, Tasha, for that lovely intro. Thank you, everyone who took time out to be here today. Thank you to our host and everyone who contributed to this event. I'm really excited to be here and sharing my story with you all. It's not often that the narratives of Afro-Latinos are showcased, you know, when it comes to the Latinx community. So to be a part of something like this, I was really excited when Tasha called me. So I'm going to just share just a picture, just a visual to go with some of this to give you some insight. So like Tasha mentioned, my name is Bresheena. I am Afro-Latina. My father was born in Belize and my mother was born in El Salvador. I grew up all over Southern California, Alvarado, Linwood, Compton, Long Beach. But Long Beach is what I call home. I graduated from Long Beach Poly High, and then I attended LBCC. And there I did a lot of community organizing work for the Black students on campus. And then I transferred to San Francisco State University, where I obtained my bachelor degree. I currently now work for Kaiser Permanente Educational Theater in Northern California as a community health liaison. I started Azúcar Negra Productions in 2019 to help educate people about the diversity that exists within African and Black communities. After years of having to explain my background and answer questions from my Latinx community and other communities, such as, why do you speak Spanish? I realized that a common pattern amongst Californians is that they had not been exposed to Afro-Latinos. And if they were, it certainly wasn't someone of my complexion with my kinky curly hair. So I'm honored to be here and to be a part of this conversation because I have always existed in between these two cultures. But I do consider myself multicultural because I grew up with my Belizean culture, where I was exposed to delicious foods like fried jacks, sere, and rompopo. But I predominantly grew up with my Salvadorian culture from my mother, where she, talked a lot about just her experiences growing up in El Salvador and some of the things that she endured firsthand, some of the atrocities that were committed there during the time that the Civil War was taking place from the 1980s to about 1992. So my mother fled here to seek refuge from the violence that was taking place in her native land. And so after 2 attempts of trying to cross the border, she finally made it here on her 3rd attempt. 3 is a charm. And that is how my father and her met in LA. When I was younger, I remember my mother taking us to the pupuserias, which is the restaurants that sell pupusas, on the weekends, so she can get a taste of her native home and also feed the hungry bellies of 5 hungry children. We would eat pupusas revueltas, pupusas de loroco, chicharrones with yuca, and semita for dessert. Since I could remember, every time we went out, people constantly questioned my mother's relation to my Black siblings and I. Are those your kids? They'd always ask her. And I was always so confused. It wasn't until I learned about race that I finally understood why they asked her those questions. With that being said, I would like to share an excerpt from my autobiography that I am currently writing. It was the first day of 1st grade, and I had been placed in an ESL class, being that Spanish is my first language. The bell rang, and all my classmates ran outside for recess. I looked around and saw that cliques had already been formed. As I observed the field looking for a clique to join, I saw two of my classmates bouncing a ball and I figured, hey, it's worth a shot. Let me go say hello. I walked over and in Spanish, I said, hi, my name's Bresheena. Can I play with you guys? The shorter one looked at me disgusted and responded, no, as if I had insulted her. I proceeded to ask, why not? Because you're Black, she responded. Who cares? I speak Spanish just like you, I said, confidently thinking that she would have to accept my offer because we share a common trait. Hablamos español. But look at the color of your skin, she responded with so much anger in her voice. I looked down at my hands and realized that she was right. My complexion was much darker than hers. As a matter of fact, it was darker than all of my classmates. I reflected on my family and their complexions, and it dawned on me that I was the darkest one of my siblings, but how come they never seemed to care? That was the moment that I realized I was Black. That was the moment that I was introduced to race. It had never been brought to my attention by my parents before, or anyone else for that matter. I felt a bit betrayed because my anti-Black classmate was telling me the truth, but my parents failed to mention it to me. That particular situation is what ignited my journey of anti-Blackness. In my 5-year-old brain, I had equated my Blackness to being unworthy, a sin, and a problem. I spent the rest of my days at Lindbergh Elementary in Linwood in isolation. No one talked to me. No one wanted to play with me. Staff and teachers treated me differently than the rest of my peers. And the only person that I felt had my back was my big sister, Dirce, who is a full Salvadorian chingona. There were many occasions I recall where she would find me crying in the playground and she'd ask me, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Who did it? Then she'd drag me by my arm and demand that I point out the bully. When she would find out who it was, she'd walk over to them, grab them by the shirt, and start yelling in their face. Next time you mess with my sister, I'm gonna beat you up. That often kept the bullies away. But as soon as they became frustrated, I was always the first person on the top of their list that they would want to pick on. I spent many days following the cool clique of girls around the playground who would only acknowledge me when I had snacks. As soon as they devoured my bag of hot Cheetos, they would look at me and say, do you have more? If I said no, they would end our temporary friendship until I returned with more treats. And sadly, I'd fall for their truce to be friends over and over again. One particular girl, we'll call her Teresa, was the only one who seemed to show any sign of sympathy. She agreed to be my friend, but only if I kept it a secret. I couldn't tell the other kids about our secret friendship. And as desperate as I was for friends, I agreed to any and all of her terms, as long as she acknowledged my existence. I considered her my best friend because the sad reality was that she was my only friend. I began to form friendships with the kids in a special ed class next door. They never seemed to mind that I was Black, and I didn't seem to mind that they were different. They never brought up my race, and I never mentioned their disability. It was a genuine act of acceptance on both ends that would often lead to my daily dose of wanted social engagement on the playground. So that concludes the excerpt. I was 5 years old when this experience happened and started. And although these experiences created a lot of sadness and confusion, and anger in my life, it also contributes to the incredible woman that I am today. These experiences taught me how to be solution-oriented, confident, and to be a go-getter. These experiences taught me the value of speaking up for myself and for those who are unable to speak up for themselves. To be Afro-Latina is to recognize that we are African before we are anything else. Latinidad is not the way you look, but it's in the language that you speak, the food that you eat, the music that you listen to, the traditions that are passed down. Latinidad is not a race, it's a practiced culture. I would like to end my section with a poem that I wrote, and it starts off with a quote that I read one time, and it inspired me to write the poem because I just could relate to the quote so much. So I'll start with the quote, and then my response is the poem. And just heads up, this poem it has Spanish in it. It's in English and Spanish. And I'm just gonna keep it in how it is. But how can you be Latina? You don't even look like the women in the telenovelas. Honey, we are more diverse than the media portrays. We do not have one look. We come in many different shades. Piel de caramelo, piel color de café, piel oscura, piel clara, y piel color de miel. Our skin may be a contradiction of what society believes, but our job is not to change the way that we are perceived. However, it is our duty to educate those who are unaware that the African diaspora is the reasons why Blacks live everywhere. So please, don't look so shocked the next time you hear me speak Spanish. Or please, don't stare at me like I'm from a different planet. I am a Black Latina. Soy una negra bella. Y a mí me vale si la sociedad no me cree. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Bresheena. That was emotional. That was very emotional. And just looking at the chat, I had to stop looking for a while because, you know, but those experiences and those stories that you tell from children's perspective, and able to remember those stories and write about those stories are really powerful, because I know that so many people have very similar experiences. And with that, I want to share something with you. And this is really good because last year when we were in person and we got to do our event and had a panel in person. And one of the things that I did, I started the session off by showing this map, right? Showed the map. Those of you that were there, it was standing room only. It was a small room, but it was still standing room only. And with that map, I said, just take a peek. And this is the map. It should be interactive so that we can see. But once we get the interactive portion, what this does is it shows something that we may not be too familiar with. It shows that, and I don't want to use the word only because 500,000 people is a lot of people. This is the movement of Black bodies through the transatlantic institution of slavery. From Africa, this map shows a timeline through the years of where we were taken, where our ancestors were taken. And for those of you that don't know, yeah, if you can make that smaller so you can see. For those of you that don't know, that portion in between West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, that whole area, And South America, United States, that's called the Black Atlantic. Called the Black Atlantic because it's lined with Black bodies that for one reason or another didn't make it here, chose not to go on that journey. But look at the massive proportions of individuals, our people, our ancestors, where they went. So about 500,000 to North America, but over 5 million went to South and Central America, with the majority going to Brazil. And if you see that portion, that entry point on the east side, I used to live in a town called Salvador, Bahia, Brazil. That's where the majority of the enslaved people went or were taken. And part of this story, we don't always hear about Africans in Mexico. So that map is enlightening, disturbing, relevant, and it shows some things in some cultures that deserve to be recognized. And one of the first times I heard about African people in Mexico was a friend of mine, Ada Camacho. And I was like, what? Africans in Mexico? And again, when I met Dr. Gloria Arjona, when we were doing our visioning for the African American Cultural Center, she was one of the people that I spoke with. And she told me some amazing things, and she's gonna share some song and a little town that you may have heard of there in Mexico. And with that, I'd like to say Dr. Gloria Arjona was born in El Paso, Texas, and grew up in Mexico City. Living as well in the Mexico states of Chiapas and Yucatan. She has lived in Los Angeles for more than 30 years. Dr. Arjona received her PhD in Spanish from University of Southern California, where she taught Spanish language and literature for 16 years. She currently teaches at the California Institute of Technology. Everyone, I'd like for you to welcome Dr. Gloria Arjona.
Thank you, Tasha. Muchas gracias. And thank you, everyone, for being here. I have many stories to share with you tonight. And sometimes those stories apparently do not relate directly to me, but I have always known that they are indeed related to me. So I call myself a storyteller through visual images and songs. So I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint. As Tasha mentioned, I am an educator above anything, and I like a little bit of everything to tell my stories. And I have been teaching, as many of you, through Zoom. Okay, so now at the beginning it was quite challenging, but now I get more and more familiar, and I am starting to like it. So I have a lot of information to share, but please, I know that I have 15 minutes, okay? So don't feel bad if you need to interrupt me, because then we're going to open for the audience for a questions and answer session. And we are eager, all of us, to share with you what we know. Okay, so as Tasha mentioned, Brazil was the first country that received, and I want to say not slaves, but enslaved people, because they were not born slaves, they were enslaved by somebody, esclavizados. The second country was Mexico. And seldom anybody recognizes Mexico, and as Bresheena was saying, El Salvador, because El Salvador was, after the conquest, part of the viceroyalty of New Spain, Mexico. And seldom are these countries, Mexico and El Salvador and Guatemala, as countries with a strong African heritage. But Mexico was the second port of enslaved people after Brazil. As you can see, these are just numbers, not very accurate numbers, because of course there was back in those times, and as there is today, contrabando. There were, besides this number, there were other enslaved people that would be in the black market, okay? So after Brazil, which in the 17th century brought 5 million people, from the 17th century to the 19th century, Mexico, through the West Indies, only 4.5 million people. And from there, they would come through mainly from Veracruz. That's why you see that strong, visible in Veracruz, the African heritage. But it doesn't mean that the African heritage in Mexico exists only in Veracruz, because from Veracruz, they would be taken to all around the country. Recently, since the year 2015, they made census for the people to have, for the first time after more than 1 century, the option to decide if you consider yourself Afro-descendant. And every single state of Mexico had people that consider themselves Afro-descendants. So from Veracruz, they were taken to Mexico to work, and to all over to the north and the south to work in the tobacco industry, coffee, cotton, sugar, mining, rice, and in the big cities. I wanted to add this, in the service, because in Mexico City, there were a lot of Afro-descendants working as servants, as maids, as nannies, for rich people. It was the elite loved to have slaves to show off, because of course they were expensive and they were a sign of status. Okay, but that's not it. Afro-descendants were in Mexico from the very moment that the Spanish stepped into the Americas. And when I say America, please, at least for tonight, I am not referring to the United States, okay? So the Indian codices, the indigenous people that after the conquest recorded their story, they recorded Afro-descendant conquistadors. They are today recognized as black conquistadors. So there were Afro-descendants, free Afro-descendants first, before than enslaved people. If, just for your information, in the United States, everybody knows the story of Ponce de Leon, the conquistador that came to what today is Florida in look for the youth, for the eternal youth fountain, and he brought with him many African conquistadors. One of them is recorded, I believe, is in this. Well, some people recognize this African conquistador as Juan Cortés, because he accompanied Hernán Cortés. Another as the African conquistador that accompanied Ponce de Leon. But the important thing is that the African presence in what today is the United States was at least 1 century before the European presence, okay, because they arrived to Florida in the early 16th century, or late 15th century rather. Okay, so I wanted to share about, to demystify, one of the common myths is that enslaved people would passively accept their destiny. And that's a total lie, because from the very beginning, there were uprisings of indigenous, of Africans, and together indigenous and African people, just as we are tonight, okay? And they would risk their lives, and they would go to the high mountains and founded their cities, known in Mexico as palenques, and in other countries as mocambos, cumbes, and in Brazil as quilombos. And over there, they would found their little cities and they would keep their traditions. That's why we have those traditions. And I am amazed to share with you, those of you who do not know, that one of the most notorious runaway slaves, cimarrones, maroons, was Yanga or Nyanga, who is known today in Mexico as the first liberator of slavery, because he resisted the Spaniards for 30 years, giving them so much headaches that at the end they have to grant him and his palenque the status of a free slave territory, and this was in 1608. So these are stories that really, as the previous, as Bresheena, whom I knew before and we worked together before. I'm so happy to see her. These are stories that need to be told, because unfortunately we don't have these heroes in our history books. Why? Why? When he is so important, okay? Yanga, he was born in Central Africa, probably in the middle of the 16th century, and came to the Americas, enslaved, of course, and he probably planned his escape while he was traveling, because as soon as he arrived to the Americas, he escaped and, as I said before, resisted the Spanish authorities for 30 years until the King of Spain recognized his territory as the free territory of Yanga, San Lorenzo de los Negros, founded in 1608. So that's only a little bit of a story that I wanted to share with you. I feel very passionate about this. Another way to tell stories is not, this is a replica of a mocambo, of a palenque. This is in a museum, a small museum in Guerrero, and you can see how they were organized and how they survived and how they used. They were sustainable. Now that we love that idea, and they cultivated the native plants and they survived. Okay, like Yanga, they survived for 30 years, and not only in Mexico. We have a notice of mocambos in Brazil, in Colombia, in Central America, in Venezuela. Okay, but we seldom identify Mexico as a country with this rich African heritage. I want to share with you. Well, these images come from the Spanish chronicles. Okay, of course, the mocambos or the palenques, they were the worst threat for the Spanish authority, so they would destroy immediately as soon as they knew about any of these establishments. They would destroy that. Okay. It's not a coincidence, and I wanted to show just a little bit that most of the music, Latin American music, have terms that derive from an African language. I cannot think in any genre of music or dance in Latin America, not only Mexico, that does not derive from an African term. And just to mention a few: cumbia, bamba, bachata, candombe, mambo. You hear that? That's African language. And then in our regular language, we have a lot of words that are from African origin, like banana, chambon, chimpanzee, mondongo, mucama, quilombo, tanga, zombie. Okay, that's Africa that we have in our everyday day language. Okay, as well as in our food. When Bresheena mentioned the pupusas, I say I have to include one image of food. You know, something curious I found in while tracing the African influence in food is that the indigenous populations, although the peanut, los cacahuates, are from indigenous origin, the indigenous populations didn't pay too much attention. It was like they were not interested in the peanuts and mani, right? But the Afro descendants, they did what today we would call the Afro-Mexicans. They did, so they cultivated, they are the population that cultivated most the peanuts, and nowadays we have in these places where the African presence is very strong, like in the coast, mainly in Veracruz or in the coast of the Pacific, we have a lot of dishes with chicken and peanut, and all of these are Afro-Mestizo Mexican dishes, okay? Just to open your appetite, so you can go plátano macho. We all in Latin America we have this combination, okay? And of course, perhaps where the African influence is more notorious is in music. And I will end my brief introduction for now, because later on when we end for good, we're going to sing together, I hope, a song, the Colores, right? To honor the beautiful name and theme of this program. But I want to sing a song, I recorded it before, which is called La Bruja. And this song talks about a witch, una bruja. It's not a bad witch, okay? It's a bruja coqueta. And why a bruja? Because the Inquisition records show that many Afro-Mexican women were judged as brujas, as witches, during the colonial times. So I'm going to share with you this song that I love. Es un son del sotavento, and I'm singing this in Spanish, and then the second part in the Zapotec, which is one of the main languages of this region of Oaxaca. So I'm sharing with you this, La Bruja. Let me verify that the sound is okay, because I know that, okay, let me check here.
It's good. You can.
It's good? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Ahí viene la villa.
Ay, qué bonito es volar, y a las 2 de la mañana, y a las 2 de la mañana. Ay, qué bonito es volar, Udo ti bici durraro, udo ti bici durraro, ma vengo dove bigido, ma senda bija, cine benagi, nagi te bena, uni benamigo, Pikachi rubado, Pikachi, Pikachi, ma senda bija, ma senda ribaba. Yo me encontré con la bruja debajo de la sabana, debajo de la sabana. Yo me encontré con la bruja, dijo que me iba a meter en la barriga un iguana, y hasta me iba a morder. Escóndete, Juan, escóndete, chepa, que ya anda la bruja bajo la ventana. Me agarra la bruja, me lleva a su casa, me vuelve maceta y una calabaza. Ay, dígame usted, ¿cuántas criaturitas se ha chupado usted? Ninguna, ninguna, ninguna no ve, viendo en pretensiones de chupar usted.
Okay, I hope you like this music. I am sorry. Now I cannot stop the music. Let me stop share, okay? And well, thank you very much. And I hope, I don't know what is the program right now. We're going to open for questions, or it was a pleasure to share with you this information.
Thank you. Wow. We got a lesson, we got music, just the stories, the storytelling. So right now, Griselda, what are we going to do right now?
So
Is it
we want
Q&A time?
to take an opportunity to hear from our audience, from hear the stories beyond these screens that we have here, right? Because I think, as it's been shared, so much of our stories run deep here, not in Long Beach, but around the world, and would love to hear from you. I know Gabriela has been asking folks to submit questions, and so I just want to give some time for our folks at MOLA to send over some questions to the panel. And as we do that, I just want to also acknowledge the power of language to hurt us and to unite us. I saw that as a theme within our panel. Everything from not knowing a language and finding another way to communicate, right? So either through movement, Ryan, as you shared, that there's a group of women, a group of people that continue movement and traditions. Bresheena, you know, your story was so powerful, and language is a big part of that, right? It had the power to divide and unite, which I find amazing. And I think, you know, Gloria, in speaking about language, there are many words that we use in Mexico that come from our African ancestry. And my fascination is in language and in food. Even in food, we have that, right? So I just wanted to give a moment to everyone to talk about language and your thoughts on its power to divide or unite.
Who? I'm sorry, me?
Any of our panelists.
Oh, okay. I was reading the questions. Yeah.
Bresheena,
Power of language to divide or unite? That's a great question.
Well, I believe that unfortunately we use it mainly to divide, okay? But I always say that the power of art, the power of music sometimes is in many ways above our actual language, because that's an universal that's an universal language, because unfortunately it's just the way we use language to put borders, to put frontiers. It shouldn't be that way. So I'm so glad that we are sharing this, because like in Spanish, that when we are recognizing all those terms from indigenous origin, from African origin, so that should unite us. Like I was reading, I'm sorry that I get a little bit distracted, because I was reading about the peanuts that some people in the audience, and I'm sorry talking about language, I'm sorry about my accent, okay? Because sometimes it seems like I am saying something else, but somebody was saying about the peanuts, that in all over Africa they have dishes made with peanuts, and this is a food, a product born in Mesoamerica, and then taken by our African ancestors to Africa.
Yeah. Any other comments before we move on? Bresheena, yes.
Yeah, so I don't know, I have a very interesting relationship with language, especially with the English language, because it's not our native tongue, it's the colonizer's language. And so there's so many things that just can't be put into words in the English, vocabulary. But there's so much power in words, and, words are almost, I see them as spells sometimes. You have to watch what you say, you have to watch what you put out on the universe. And with my experience, even though I was someone who speaks Spanish, and as a kid, I was able to, engage with all my classmates, and we only spoke Spanish. It was the ESL class. It wasn't enough. It always came down to, how do you look? What are the features that are present? But I think that it can be definitely used as a tool to empower one another. And there's ways we can find ways to use this so that it can pull our communities together, instead of separating us. I think about the word like negra, and that's something that, if African American heard, somebody of Latin, a Latino person say, "Oh, esta negra," or, they're going to be like, "What? What did you just call me? Like, did you just call me the N-word?" But in Spanish, negra means Black. It means someone of a darker complexion even. And so even the words that sound similar like that, it could be a little misleading, I guess. So I always like to I go from the heart and what I feel, from the spirit and like the energy that I feel. I think that's the most powerful way for me to communicate and be communicated with.
Thank you for answering my question. I appreciate it. Bresheena, we actually have a question for you from the audience, from Cynthia Brayboy. They would, in regards to the story you shared, did you reach out to African American students? If so, what was the response? If not, what made you not want to reach out?
Yeah, so when I lived in Linwood, it was a predominantly Latino community there. We were one of the only Black families in that area. There wasn't that many Black kids in my school. And so in my class, I was the only Black girl. So I didn't really have, if it wasn't my siblings that I would reach out to talk to, like my sisters, then I didn't really engage. Then I would engage with, the people who engaged with me. I think once I moved to Compton and I was exposed more to like a Black community and was around more Black people, and I saw the way that, they kind of took me in, and they were like the first friends I ever made were Black people. The people I became closest to are Black people. And just that acceptance from that community, I think it really created this like love that I have for Black people now, because they were the first ones to accept me and take me in. Obviously, I mean, of course that came with certain types of, rules sometimes, where it was like, you can't speak Spanish around us, you can't talk that stuff, or a lot of questions, or sometimes making me feel left out. But for the most part, they were still accepting, like, like, you're one of us, you look like us, your mom don't really look like us, we don't know what's going on, but you look like us. And so as I got older, that's when I started to appreciate my Blackness more, the more that I was around Black people, which is really important, to really have a community there at that age.
Bresheena, I have a question. Was there ever opportunity to teach your Black friends Spanish, or was there ever opportunity where you were able to help communicate with other communities, with the Spanish-speaking community, because you were present?
Yeah, so I mean, I was, my siblings and I, we were all translators as kids. I was translating for my mom when I was in first grade or second grade. When I started going to school in Compton, it was like, they didn't have Spanish speakers and something needed to be communicated. I was usually the one to translate over for my mother. And there were opportunities, I think, for me to teach Spanish. I mean, I've worked a lot with the youth also in Long Beach. And so I've done some Spanish classes before for free, where I was just teaching kind of basic, Spanish. And then as far as my friends, a lot of them would be like, yeah, teach me Spanish. I want to learn Spanish. And they'd be around my family and my mom. They'd be like, I want to know Spanish. But none of them ever really was like followed up with the whole, like, I want to learn Spanish. And so I never chased them down like, hey, you gonna learn Spanish today? Remember you said? So I usually, if they weren't serious about it, I just kind of took it as, just like they're just saying it.
Thank you.
Ryan, we have a question for you. Documentation through your project seems to be really important for you. And just like with the picture I have behind me, there is a lot of documentation that shows, people in Mexico, that there is an African ancestry there. So, so your work is really a larger work about documenting our families, or documenting our people. Can you share a little bit more about why this project is so important for you?
Yeah, I mean, the project for Remember essentially was born out of basically the idea that me being 28 years old, I feel like we're like the last generation of folks to have physical photos of ourselves. Even new parents now, if you lose that iPhone or you lose that iPad, you have the potential to lose, all of your child's memories. So it was really just born out of, how do we go into our, grandmother's garages and talk about some of the photos that are stored there, and kind of invoke some of those memories, and hear some of those stories. And then also going back to the idea of seeing yourself in photos. For so long, people weren't able to access photos, able to have the privilege to have photos taken of them, or to visually see themselves. So I feel like part of this documentation is really just a larger scheme and representation overall.
Okay. And what's the next phase for this project? Where is it going to?
The next phase is, I was grateful enough to receive a grant from the Arts Council of Long Beach to produce this work at Play Nice. We had it all mapped out. It was ready to go. And then COVID hit. So as soon as things are back open, as we were on the call earlier, just anticipating what that looks like. But as soon as things are back open and we can engage with the public, I'm looking forward to having the interactive event where folks are able to bring those photos in and, introduce that creative writing component, and ultimately create a book that highlights the stories and the backgrounds of the people that make up these communities. So My shop is on 4th in the Alamitos Beach community in Long Beach. And, I imagine, if we got community members, from that area to come out, and then we replicate it in North Long Beach, and then replicate it all over the city, and, come up with these volumes and these different books that highlight the experiences of the people in the community.
We'll look forward to that. Yes. And I'm very glad that we gave you a grant for that. I mean, I knew that I didn't put that question there just so that I can hear that it was more of this is a project like many projects like these that need to have space, right? They need to have a place. They need to be talked about and shared and funded. So I'm glad that that was possible for you. There's a question here. I think maybe Gloria may have some more information about this. The question is, why did it take Afro-Mexicans more than 450 years to get recognition in the Constitution, given their significant presence in the culture? And I think in your presentation, you mentioned the census, right? But can you talk a little bit more about the census and that recognition?
Yeah, well, it's a long story and has to do with language precisely, okay? There were, after the conquest in 1521, the conquest by the Spanish in Mexico, Mexico changes from Mexico Tenochtitlan to the Viceroyalty of New Spain. And they built a very sophisticated society that had a caste system, sistema de castas. That means that depending on the color of your skin, of the type of hair you had, you would be assigned a name. There was a lot of passing, of course, because as Bresheena mentioned, in one family, and I know because I am also La Negra in my house, in one family because we have so much mixing in Latin America, we have like a daughter that is blonde and another one that is very dark, so it's very, very mixed, okay? So there was this complex caste system, sistema de castas. That the most common names were, like, for example, if you were born, your father was Spanish and your mother was Afro-descendant, you were 50% Spanish and 50% Black, and you had a name and your name was mulata. Mm-hmm. If your father was Spanish and your mother was Indian, you were half and half and you were a mestiza. And they have like more than 30 names. It was a very racist, a very sexist, and a very sophisticated system that they did not even have a chance to implant because nobody... why? Because depending on your casta, you would have access or would not have access to certain positions. And that's why I always say to my students, and those of you who have contact with Latin America, that's why we are very pretentious in Latin America. We do not go to the market in just a simple shirt. Okay, no, we have to look well. Why? Because como te ven, te tratan. You don't want to get confused with somebody of a lower class because this racist system was associated with a social class, okay? And then, to make my long story short, after the Mexican independence in 1821, this nefastus system was abolished and it was prohibited by the government to ever mention racist names again and to ever classify people according to their race. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that racist ended, okay? Yes. But the names disappear, and that's one of the reasons, okay, that you will never identify yourself as Afro-descendants, because we were all the same, at least in theory. There were no names.
Right. And I think that's the connection between my family we talked about it a lot when it came out in the census, right? And I remember in high school, my mom and I went to LACMA there was a show of the casta paintings, of the cast paintings.
Yes.
And it was through those casta paintings that, my family knew the words, and they were like, oh, that's so-and-so, and oh, that's so-and-so. And it was through this painting that I learned a lot about the diversity within our own family, right? And it was like, oh, wait, so even though the government outlawed it or said, we'll never talk about this again, the language and those words remained within our families, and we were cast.
Yeah. And the names, and even if those beautiful paintings were amazing, they were very racist and sexist, and the names were pejorative names, like mulatto comes from mule. Okay, so those names had a pejorative associations. So that's why they were prohibited. And our African...
I think Tasha has the next question.
Yes.
Yep, thank you for that, Gloria, because there was a question about your background. And so you answered that and brought in some more. So thank you so much. One of the things that I knew that you were speaking in different areas of Central America, but in Brazil, I remember there were about 62 different classifications for Black. And I'm like, 62? How is that possible? And I was given a name while I was there. And it was one of those names that, that you mentioned. But our next question is, and I want to tell you, after this, you will have the opportunity to ask your questions and tell your stories. And it is going to be live streamed on YouTube. So make sure that if you would like to join us and speak, that you know that this will be on YouTube. So we have Dr. ACLB, who I happen to know, who is a professor. Why do you suppose there are areas with Black and Brown conflict and other areas with Black and Brown strong allyship? I grew up with strong Chicano allies. I believe Dr. Alabi is from Santa Ana and lived in Mexico for a while as well. So if anyone, or Dr. Arjona, if you want to answer that question, or if anyone else wants to chime in and answer that question. Why are there strong allies and then within the communities and not?
I don't mean to be, I don't want to be too much political, okay? But of course, the dominant culture is convenient for the dominant culture that we are divided. I mean, this is a strategy that the Spanish implemented from the beginning in Mexico. They put together people from Africa that they were even rivals, okay? And they put them together. Why? To avoid communication, to avoid to avoid the danger that they always had, that they would come together with a strategy they were the majority, okay? So I believe really that is conveniently planned, that this rivalry is not the only cause, of course, because it's complex, but I believe that that's something that has been used by the dominant culture from the beginning in many, in all the history, to divide our people, and also is an outcome of ignorance, okay? Because unfortunately, many Mexican people, and I know because whenever I talk about the African heritage in Mexico, they insist, no, but there are not Black people in Mexico, okay? Because they don't see, they don't think that it exists, okay? So it's also, unfortunately, ignorance.
Yes. And unfortunately, it still exists in a lot of areas, which was a little bit of our reason for coming here today as well. So thank you for the stories and for the history. And this is, there are many more conversations like this to take place. There are so many comments in the chat. People want to see this continuing to go on and on. This is how we chip away some of those divides, bridge some of the divides, and through our storytelling. So we want to take this opportunity now to open it up so that you all can speak. You all can tell your stories. If you have anything that you want to share, let's keep in mind that we do have those community rules. Let's just be mindful, respectful, compassionate in this whole process. We want to share this space with each other. We want to make sure everyone feels welcome to speak. And one of the main things it said, not everybody is going to agree with some of the things that are said, but just hold yourselves accountable. And yeah, if you'd like to speak, do the raise hand option. There's
raise your hand, and we will then on the backside, the back end of Zoom, our fabulous tech people at MOLA will make you into a panelist. So you will have the option to speak with your video on or just use your audio.
Thank you. And as we wait,
if you cannot find the raised hand, that's absolutely okay. You can put in the chat that you would like to speak. Perez Norma.
Hola. Hi everybody. I'm really excited to have been joining and just seeing this beautiful Sheena. I know her. Hi, Sheena. So basically my story, I'm Salvadorian, Afrodescendiente, and this is something that is very, very denied in El Salvador because of the fact that since we don't have we're in a different coast, they're like, oh, pues acá nunca vinieron negros. They never brought the, blacks here, so this doesn't exist. And so there's still a fight in El Salvador with trying to bring in the recognition and the rights. So there's still like no rights for us out there. And there's been just, and I think it's also too the fact that a lot of us don't have as prominent features. And so, I always have to tell people like, look, in 1821, 95% of the population in San Miguel, El Salvador was of African descent. 15 to the 1600s, they were brought here. So it's, even the laws that happened in 1930 that basically prohibited anybody of African, Asian, Mediterranean to come into the country. But the only people that were allowed were European of descent to basically do a whitening of the race. So it's been quite a fight, but there's a lot of us that are out there that are really trying to bring this forward, so that everybody can know about this. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your story, your words.
I'm sorry, can I just say for Perez Norma, she also has an amazing vegan Salvadorian business. She's a chef. She makes vegan Salvadorian food, which I haven't tasted yet, but it's on my to-do list. So you all should definitely check out her IG. She has a lot of good things to choose from, to taste.
Thank you,
Share that in the chat. Absolutely.
Put it in the chat. And this conversation has engaged my mind, and I'm also hungry. Do we have any others? Oh, we have Dr. Alabi.
How you doing?
Welcome.
Greetings, everybody. I just want to thank the panel. This has been fascinating and very enjoyable. I just wanted to share just a little bit. So I'm from North Carolina, where in the 80s, when I first came to California, in North Carolina, everybody was Black and white in the 80s and before. And then there was the occasional like Chinese family that owned the Chinese restaurant. And then somebody's cousin who was Puerto Rican that came from New York. So that was really kind of what we were exposed to in the South. So I came to California, and then I was exposed to diversity. And I thought Mexicans were Puerto Ricans, and I thought Samoans were Black people. And I, of course, thought every Asian was a Chinese person, because when you're from the South, you don't really have that background. But I came to Santa Ana, and at the time, Santa Ana had a really large Black population, partly because of the Marine Corps bases in Tustin and El Toro. And like almost all my friends were Mexican. And I guess what I want to share is so many of my friends today are married to Mexicans. Mexican men are married to Black women. Mexican women are married to Black men. My ex-husband is a Mexican man. And I remember distinctly this occasion, like going to LA was like a field trip to us, but early in the 90s, we went to LA, and this guy was like, you know, Black and brown, it's going down. And I was like, what? And he was like, you got to choose what side. And we were like, what are you talking about? And we were very surprised to hear that, because it was so foreign to us that there was any problem between Black and brown people. And it's still hard for me to hear, because in college, the Mechistas politicized me. Black Student Union and Mecha were like hand in hand. We didn't do anything without each other. And so I can't imagine trying to take on, you know, college politics without Mecha. And so to think that young people today, Black Student Union and Mecha aren't working together like the Brown Berets and the Black Panthers, it's hard for me to just hear that. As a sociologist, I always try to teach my students about the diaspora. So I'm just glad to hear all that I heard today. And as a professor, I'm going to stop now before I lecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.
And just to add a little bit of what Dr. Alavi said, here in Los Angeles, there is a large community of Blaxicans, which are those children of Mexicans with Afro-Americans, which is very interesting.
We have Maria Requeño.
Hello, I'm also here supporting Bresheena, and oh my God, I'm getting emotional, but she was one of my students in high school, and I remember when her and her sister started to speak Spanish, because like she said, that's, you know, her first language, and that was mine too. And I remember the story where they told me that you know, Latinos didn't accept them, you know, because they were Black. And I remember clearly telling them, like, I see you, you know, I see you. And I just can't believe that, well, I could, right? But we have to, as educators, we really have to challenge us, and as non-Black educators, Black Latinos, right? Because they are there, and because the stories are, this is my internet. Can you guys hear me?
You cut out just a little bit, but go ahead.
And, you know, it's very important, because until, you know, even now we have a lot of anti-Blackness in our communities. And, you know, as I'm navigating, you know, things I research, I'm learning, I'm constantly learning, because for me it's important to make sure that I see Black students, especially in Long Beach. And, you know, we are against each other, and, you know, that has to come with resources, gangs, violence, drug use, and the prison industrial complex. So all these things, you know, we're survivors, right? Like, we come from these hoods, and it's tough. And like Gloria said, the government is putting us against each other, right? We're fighting for jobs. There is no jobs. Oh, you know, there's so limited resources. But I'm really happy, and I really do challenge educators to to make sure that when they do see that 5-year-old, right? When they do see that 5-year-old in the playground, and she or he or they are lonely, that they speak up. Because if you do not speak up, you are complicit. And we must destroy the idea that it's not in our business. It is our business. We must show up. And so I just want to say thank you for such an amazing event. And I'm so proud of Bresheena. She has blossomed so much. The way that she speaks, I love it. I was like, oh yes, I'm gonna be, we're from Long Beach, so I was like, I'm gonna show up for you. This is great. And to hear her speak and just say her story, it really, it really touches my heart, because I know that she has fought many adversities, as it is. And it's really lovely to see.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. And for being here to listen and support. Bresheena, you brought something, you said many important things. One of the things that I wanted to highlight, that initially when we joined this conversation, I talked about, calling Griselda and saying, hey, I heard, Black and browns don't get along in Long Beach. And I called multiple folks and 4 generations of Long Beach people. And one of the things that they said was, you can have your conversation via Zoom, but eventually you're going to have to bring it into the community, right? Because the community folks that are perpetuating a lot of this on both sides aren't going to be here, right? And there are the elders, the OGs, that want to be able to talk to the younger generations to say, hey, we're not there anymore. It's not worth it. It's time, So call us optimists, call us rose-colored glasses wearer, but I think that, once we get to a point where we can go back into the community, we need to, approach this conversation and keep on having them.
Absolutely. And I think something very important to uplift from this conversation and to take with us, it's that it's not only that the community is perpetuating, it's that it's the Mexican government and those in power, the United States government and those in power, and all of these other countries that created the system, right? And ingrained in us or created the bans, the let's not talk about it, the silence. And so we're acting within the supremacist culture.
Exactly.
Right? It's not, it's in many ways built and we are placed in that role, and we continue until we break that system and
we break it.
Have the conversation, right? So I really think that this is just the beginning of it all. And I invite everyone here and everyone on our panel to continue with us in this process so that we could have the conversations that break it down, meeting by meeting.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Griselda. So we have time for a song.
Yes, we do.
And then we're going to wrap it on up.
Gloria to also sing a song for us, De Colores. And as she prepares, De Colores is, we're unclear of the history. There's lots of theories on how it all came to be. We have the poetic structure of it, and that you can talk about the poetic structure, but it's also, it's colonial. We can talk about that. But something really beautiful about De Colores is that it became a movement song. And for me, I see We Shall Overcome and De Colores as social movement songs as well, right? They're similar in that way. So Gloria, take it away.
Well, thank you. So I hope in your places you sing with me. This is usually associated with children, which is fine, okay? But actually it's not, originally it's not a children's song, okay? But it's for everybody, okay? And I love the message because it says the colores out of many colors. That's the important message, okay? Out of many colors, everything exists, okay? So I'm going to sing, and hopefully you sing, and forgive me, the sound is not great, okay? We are learning to navigate in Zoom. De colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajarillos que vienen de fuera. De colores es el arco iris que vemos lucir. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. De colores brillantes y finos se viste la aurora. De colores son los 1000 reflejos que el sol atesora. De colores es el arco iris que vemos lucir. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. De colores. Thank you.
Thank you.